was coming home really drunk from a wild bachelor party that went too far. His presence shocked me.
This is one of the craziest things that has ever happened to me, and it changed my life. Hi Redditors, my name is Lane77 and I am divorced with no children. I would not be saying my age either. I actually managed to ruin not only my marriage, but also my family and social life too. It was just this night that everything started going downhill. My car was gone, like disappeared into thin air from what I could tell. I did not see my car where I had left it and I was shocked. I had to make some calls to ask what happened after the party. It was just the night before, so I doubt that something had happened to a car that was parked in a secure compound. And then I quickly remembered something and checked my purse, only to find that the key was no longer in it, but I did not remember losing it since I never pulled them out the previous night. I was panicking and I knew I would be in serious trouble if Zane, my husband, was going to find out that I had lost the car he had gifted me after our wedding. But I also did not want to lie, so I decided to call him and tell him. He was pretty understanding, so he would not fault me too much if I told him rather than him finding out about it himself. So I rang him up, trying and failing to hide the panic in my voice as I spoke to him, and told him that I could not find the car where I had left it the previous night, and he only chuckled on the other side of the line. I got confused and asked him why he was laughing, to which he responded that he had left home earlier so he could get the car taken to a mechanic for some maintenance, and I could not help the sigh of relief that exited in my body, which only made Zane laugh some more. Now, the reason why I was looking for my car in the first place was actually a party. What would a married woman be doing at a party, you might be wondering? See, I was invited to a bachelor party, and the bachelor party that I was invited to was not like your everyday bachelor parties where maybe it would just be ladies renting out the VIP lounge of a club or something, or maybe men going to a strip club or something before the weddings. This one was a mixed party, with both the guys and the ladies partying out in a mansion, a friend's mansion actually. I promised my husband that I would be home before it got too late or too dark, and that if it got too late, I would call him to come pick me up. I was getting drunk and I tended to cry and pass out when I got drunk, and I'd sooner bite off and swallow my tongue than embarrass myself in front of so many people. So I decided that I would leave before I was too far gone and make it in time before Zane got worried about me. I did not expect that I would stay there for so long. I did not even plan to stay at the house for too long. But before I knew it, I had stayed past midnight and even ended up participating in certain games at the party, some little sort of childish games, and I ended up drinking so much that I could feel my eyes stinging, and I decided that it was time to leave, so I went to the guests of honor who happened to be friends of mine and bid them farewell. The lady, my childhood friend named Melody, whined and begged me to stay longer, but I only laughed and told her that I really had to go, so she agreed finally and let go of my arm so I could leave the house and head home. I told my friend that the plan was to call Zane to come pick me up, so I would need to go outside to make the call. I had been calling Zane for a while and he was not picking up. I was more or less panicking, but I knew that I could not drive home anymore, so I would have to take a cab or maybe call a designated driver. But the designated driver might just get me kidnapped, or so my paranoid self thought, so I decided that I would take a cab home for the night. I took a cab and I was dropped off close to my driveway. I staggered my way to the door and struggled to get the door open with my keys, but while the keys fit in the keyhole, it simply would not budge, so I decided to poke around at the side of the door to find the doorbell. I did just that and I rang the doorbell, pressing constantly because my drunk self thought it was fun to push on the button. A very pissed, and I don't know how to describe the other emotion on his face, came out to open the door. I found myself trying to force myself to sober up. I mean, it was a funny sight to take in with me. So drunk and trying to straighten up in the heels that I had walked out of the house in because I saw my husband's face. He simply raised a brow and crossed his arms over his chest before leaning against the doorframe to observe me more. I was squirming under his critical gaze as we had a staring contest. A staring contest which I quickly lost because I could not keep staring into his cold eyes. Finally, it was a sigh, a very angry sigh from Zane that broke the silence, and his words made me stumble backwards. Zane told me to go back to where I was coming from, and my eyes went wide, and I shook my head rapidly, and I asked him what he meant. Zane only let out a dry laugh and told me he was teasing me and that I should get my drunk self inside before I embarrassed him more. I was scared, but the smile Zane gave me made me relax. He even extended an arm for me to take as he helped me into the house so I would not fall on my face on the way to the stairs, helping me climb one step at a time and holding my waist to steady me on my feet till we were in our room, and I almost fell on my face because my knees buckled in relief, and Zane laughed at me before going down on one knee to help me out of my heels as I sat on the floor. I thanked him, feeling embarrassed and shyly looking off to the side while he worked and rubbed on my ankles too. He ran a bath for me and told me to go in while he made the bed so we could go to bed. I was so damn tired that I did not notice any other thing that my husband did after he returned from the bathroom and asked me to go in. I didn't even notice that he had picked up the clothes I had removed on the room floor, and the shoes too. I only remember my head hitting soft pillows, and then I was off in a dreamless void of sleep. I woke up pretty late the next morning, but I did not bother with it since it was a Saturday, and I could always just decide to sleep in some more, but I knew I could not, and I got up quickly with a massive hangover that threatened to rip my skull apart. I struggled to get out of the bed and down the water and aspirin that Zane had no doubt left for me on the bedside drawer, and then I hopped in the bathroom to finish my morning routine and leave the house. I needed to go get my car where I had left it, at my friend's place. I could not find my husband when I woke up, just a small sticky note on the kitchen counter with a plate with 2 sandwiches on it. The note read that his father had sent for him, so he had to leave early to attend to the man, and I only nodded as I put the note inside the drawers that I often left all his little notes before digging into my breakfast. It was steadily approaching 2 weeks, and I had yet to see my car, and Zane was not telling me anything anymore. Not about the car and not about the car shop he had taken the car to. I had no idea, so I was stuck either having him drive me to work or just taking a cab if Zane was either not around or too busy to take me to work. Of course, I had been asking Zane about my car and when I would be getting it back, but Zane always gave me vague answers like later, or he would call the mechanics or call the shop to ask about the car and the progress of the servicing. And knowing Zane and his temper sometimes when I nagged too much, I made sure to swallow all unnecessary comments and stop asking about the car. I felt that he would give me a definite answer when he was ready to talk to me. Zane stopped eating my food a week later after the last time I had asked him about my car and decided to let the matter rest. He would always say that he was not hungry or that he was not in the mood to eat what I had prepared for us, so I would end up eating dinner and breakfast alone every day. I did not know if he was sick or something else was wrong with him, since I did not see or notice any tells that he was sick, and he did not look wrung out like he did when he was feeling burnt out. He was just unnaturally cold to me. I was perplexed and I did not know what to do, so I called his older sister. She had picked up the phone asking who was on the line, and I had frozen up. Zane's sister was someone I talked to a lot, so she would definitely have my number, but here she was, on the other end of the line asking who it was that she was talking to. I quickly gathered my thoughts and told her that I was the one calling. I called my name, saying it was me talking, and the woman's voice turned cold as she demanded to know the reason I was calling her. She was rude and harsh about it, and I could feel my temper rising, but I stamped it down, reminding myself that my sister-in-law was far older than I was, so I kept my voice calm and respectful. I told her that her brother was not eating at home anymore and that I was worried about him. She asked if it was her business to know about her brother's dealings and why I would be calling her to ask her such things. I replied saying that I was just scared for him and I wanted to confirm if maybe he had said something to her about what was wrong with me. My sister-in-law suddenly turned hostile and asked if it was my business what he might have told his family members in private and why I would want to concern myself with whatever it was that he was doing in his free time. I had never heard my sister-in-law so harsh with me before. She was literally yelling on the phone. I quickly apologized profusely, tears welling in my eyes, and she replied that I would have nothing to be sorry about if I learned to mind my business, and that I should endeavor to avoid calling her for useless matters again, and she promptly hung up, the receiver slamming down harshly as she put it down and the line went dead. It continued like that. Zane did not really have time for me anymore, and just like he started to avoid having dinner with me, it evolved into Zane straight up rejecting my cooking on the grounds that it was not what he wanted to eat at that moment. The dishwasher started to fill up with more pots and pans than what was normal in 24 hours, and the fridge had more leftovers all in plastic containers that now had labels on them. Some were labeled Zane, and I was asked no to tamper with them. Zane and I slept in one bed, but it did not feel intimate as before anymore. It was like a wide space had formed between us, and Zane had no intention of making a move for either of us to cross to either side and meet each other. It was like Zane was comfortable with all of it and even encouraged it. It was during a girls' night out with my friends, Melody, Tasha, and 2 others, that I finally broke down after a few rounds of shots and other drinks. I was crying when I began to complain about what had been going on with Zane and I, my head on the shoulder of Melody's while I cried. Melody, of course, comforted me, rubbing my back and shushing me with soothing encouragement and teasing me alike just to get me to relax, to calm down. My other friends followed suit and joined Melody in trying to comfort me, but from the corner of my eye, I saw Tasha roll her eyes, and this was followed by her clicking her tongue, and she proceeded to ask me if I was that much of a child to come crying over a simple matter such as a man ignoring me. I looked at her and angrily retorted that the man in question was my legally wedded husband. Tasha rolled her eyes again at anger. I had raised my voice at her words, but she only laughed lightly and told me that the answer to my problem was as easy as my coming out for girls' night to grab some drinks. I was puzzled by this, and Tasha gave me a look that said she was unimpressed. I asked her what she was talking about, and she laughed again, telling me that I could always just corner him at home and seduce him into talking about what was wrong with him. It made so much sense in my drunk mind, and my demeanor changed as my mood brightened up again and I was calling for another round of drinks again. But I missed the weird look that Tasha and Melody were giving me. Melody's was one of worry and panic, but Tasha's was unrecognizable, and I should have heeded the warning bells that were going off in my head. But I was too drunk and excited to dwell on it too much, so I went back to making silly toasts with the girls as we laughed and partied long into the night. It was a weekend after all. My rings disappeared a month later. One was a pretty little silver band with a beautiful cut diamond on it, and the other one was a plain silver band but was made with a layer of silver on top of the band rings. These very significant rings disappeared. The first ring was my engagement ring, and the second one with the more intricate design was my wedding band, and it was gone. I had probably lost something as nice as them. I had only taken them off to do the dishes as usual, and my husband had by the time I was finished with my chore. Other rings had vanished into thin air. If I remember correctly, Zane had walked into the house briefly while I was in the kitchen, and he had called out to me. I had answered him and had seen him poke his head into the kitchen briefly to give me an odd look, observing me while I did the dishes, giving him a small, sweet smile that he did not really return, but I did not think much of it because Melody had advised me to take everything happening like it was just a phase. My rings had disappeared afterwards, and I did not see any sense in faulting Zane as the culprit, because he had next to no reason to take the bands that he had given to me himself. Even the car that had been taken registered as nothing in my head, so I just felt that I had lost the ring. I actually went to have the wedding band remade. The design and feel was familiar to me, and I had images of the ring so I could get it made again anyway, so I rested easy. Zane left the house after a week later, a week after I had lost the rings and went to have the wedding band remade. He straight up moved out of the house. I asked him where he was going to after he returned from work one Tuesday evening, and he just replied that he was going to his family house for a visit. Yeah, right. A family visit with a big old suitcase that had his work clothes and his dress shoes, and I pointed this out only to receive nothing short of a growl from Zane at my questioning. Zane asked me how it was my business if he wanted to stay at his family house for more than the weekend. He said that since I was desperate to know his movements so badly, he would just about stay there for the next week, saying I could have the house to myself and do as I pleased, and he shouldered past me, knocking me off balance in the process, but not hard enough to land me on the floor. His exact words as he got into his car were that I could bring in a new partner if I so desired, and it was his words that stung more than the light throbbing in my shoulder that he had hit. I was confused by this. I did not understand how he would say such a thing to me, and I wanted to run out after him and demand answers, but knowing how Zane was, I would not get an answer, but would rather get on his bad side. I decided to talk to his friends about his strange behavior, and who better to ask than his closest friend in our joint friend group, a former classmate of his from school who was from my hometown and someone I knew too. Andy. Andy did not appreciate me calling him out of the blue to ask him questions about Zane, and he stated as much as he picked up the phone. He sounded irritated and disgusted just hearing my voice, and he rudely asked me to hurry up with what I was hinting at so he could get back to going about his business. I apologized almost as rudely and assured him that I would not waste his time, as I only needed to hear from someone as close as he was to Zane, without being family, about his strange behavior. I wanted an outsider's view of his newfound attitude. Andy simply sighed and asked me what gave me the idea that he would give me the answers that I needed. There was that curt tone that was bordering on rude, and I could barely contain myself at this point. My in-laws had been rude to me already, and I also did not appreciate being spoken to that way by a person I pretty much grew up with. I hit Andy with my displeasure, and the man just sighed, apologizing and explaining that he did not know how to relate with me, so he had to be rude. I told him I was confused, and he only asked me to go and check our friend group chat. He said I might find some answers in there, and the line went dead before I could question him further. Andy did not pick up another call after that, not even the next day. I had not been active in the group chat for a while, so I did not even understand what Andy had been getting at, but it still irritated me that I needed to check a group chat to know what was wrong with my husband rather than him telling me by himself, even while we shared a bed, up until the point that he was quite literally running away from me at this point. I got on the group chat again, and so many messages began to pop up, so quickly that I was not able to keep up, but one pointed message from Tasha tagging my profile with words shameful, caught my eye just as quickly as it slid past and other messages rolled in. Suddenly, a video was tagged in the chat and passed quickly, the video that I had missed earlier, so I quickly marked the message with the video tag for later, while the sea of messages continued to grow until it ended up with me being straight up booted from the group, like removed from the group. I could not reply to any of the messages anymore. I could tell from the date that I was removed from the group chat around a week ago, and since I did not open the group for so long, I could still see messages. I was shocked by this, but I decided I would ask questions about that later since I had something more important to deal with, so I decided I would just scroll through all the messages from before I was removed from the group. The messages were around 2 months old. The timeline coincided with the time Zane started to act weird at home. I was still scrolling through and reading some frankly disturbing messages that all hinted at me being an evil woman, and some messages shunning Melody for trying to defend me, threatening to kick her out of the group if she continued to defend me, so Melody went silent while the others continued to send messages. And then I saw a message from Zane saying that it would be better to talk when the subject of the matter, the root of the problem, was removed from the group first. The messages there contained detailed plans for Zane to leave the country and maybe find new pastures, and these sort of confusing messages continued until I was removed from the group. I was still trying to make sense of the cryptic messages when my phone began to ring. A call from Melody that I was going to straight up ignore because I was in no mood to speak to anyone, especially one of my friends who apparently had a hand in my husband's recent behavior. But Melody was quite determined and kept calling after I had missed the call, and even after I had cut the call, refusing to answer. I decided to just humor her determination because, after all, I could always go back to what I was doing after the call. My friend Melody sounded frantic on the phone as I picked up the call. I could barely make out what she was saying over her panicked muttering and shrieks, so I told her to calm down and talk to me, to speak clearly. Melody told me that she was going to send me a text message with an attachment, a video attachment, that I needed to watch immediately. I dropped the call. She also said not to scream or do anything too rash, but to rather call her back immediately after I had watched the video first. I obliged and I hung up so I could read the text and watch the attached video. The camera shook a bit as the person behind the camera adjusted the angle a bit. I could see familiar silhouettes, and then the camera spun rapidly to land on a scene with a bunch of people gathered in a circle, chanting loudly and laughing while they held onto glasses of champagne and vodka and beer bottles. The cameraman walked forward and pushed through the crowd, a flashlight turning on to light up the scene in the otherwise dim-lighted room. In the middle of the circle sat a man with a woman on his lap. The woman on his lap, with her arms around his neck, was wearing a top familiar baby blue, flared ankle-length gown with a slit up to mid-thigh, and familiar sparkly block-heeled strappy heels. Her hair was done in a simple side-swept style and her earrings were silver hoops. The woman was me and my lips were on his. That outfit was exactly what I had worn to Melody and her fiancé's bachelor party a while ago. I was screwed and I was so close to a panic attack as I forced my shaking hands and body to ease up on the tremors and dial up Melody again. It was the very same video that I had seen in the group chat before I was removed from the chat. The video that Tasha had tagged me with to call me a shameless woman, and that Zane had actually dropped in the group, as I had seen, and left to reply after a few days. I was shaking in my boots, shaking from my head to my toes as I looked at my feet, barely hearing Melody screaming at me to calm down over the phone. I did not even realize that I had called her back, but what I did realize after a minute of staring at the floor was that my vision was blurring and my thighs were getting wet. Tears. I cried as I sat motionless on the couch and eventually had to drop the call so I could crumple to the floor and curl up into a ball to cry some more loudly till I fell asleep, mostly from exhaustion. I fell asleep on the floor and woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. I had gotten so many calls from Melody and some worried texts too, so I groggily texted her back that I was okay and that I would see her later so we could talk, and then I got up to get ready for work. I tried calling Zane to talk to him, but he either ignored my calls or told me that we had nothing to talk about. I tried to go see him too, but he refused to see me, and his older sister disgraced me out of the compound, calling me names and hitting me, and she told me not to come back and look for her brother again, since he himself did not want to see me anymore. I left in tears, sobbing in the back seat of a cab as I made my way back home. I was still making sense of everything when Zane called to say he sent me a text and told me to call back after I saw the contents. The sight of that video again had me tearing up again, but I decided to suck it up and call Zane, who started the talk with asking how the video was, if I enjoyed the view, to which I shakily answered that I did not, and Zane chuckled at my answer. Me, why I denied not enjoying the view. Zane told me not to deny anything, pointing out that I was enjoying myself so much in the video that he doubted that I was even sorry. I tried to speak, but Zane shut me down, saying that he would be the one doing the talking and I only had to listen. He told me that he would be leaving me to do as I pleased and to move on with whoever I wanted without any restraint or hindrance, since he would also be leaving to do as he pleased. He admitted to being aware of the video long since the day of the bachelor party, and he had already made up his mind about it, so nothing I did would change his mind. Zane said this with finality and hung up, leaving me to my devices, well, tears actually. All efforts to get back in contact with Zane proved fruitless and a total waste of time because he did not pick up the phone, still wouldn't see me, and certainly gave me no room to explain myself in any way. So I was stuck waiting for when Zane would deem me worthy of his presence and agree to speak with me. It was a month later that I saw Zane again, and it was in my office that we met. He had come to my office holding onto a decent-sized brown envelope that he said was for me. He slammed a brown envelope on my desk and asked me to quickly sign the papers inside. I had seen this coming, but I did not expect it to be so soon. The papers inside the envelope were definitely divorce papers. I had tried begging and trying to explain myself after we had the fight about that god-awful video, but he did not listen to me and said he was going to go ahead with the divorce since he was not sure that I would not get involved in a bigger issue or scandal than the one at the party. Zane was already a free man in his books, since he did not look at me anymore, did not treat me like a wife anymore, and we were just housemates at this point. He was just waiting to finish processing the divorce papers so we could both sign and dissolve the marriage completely. I mean, it's not like he was the one swapping saliva with a stranger and frankly enjoying every minute of it. I was practically humping the man in the video, and I had been trying to explain to Zane that I was too drunk to understand what had happened, but of course Zane did not pay any mind to what I was saying. He was done with me, and I had no other option left than to pack up my bags. I had begged Zane to give me a little time to get myself in order, and then I would sign the papers without any complaint of any kind, and Zane had rolled his eyes at me, scoffing at my request but obliging nonetheless, waving me off as he left my office. He had actually been quite civil about the matter, but I knew very well that it was all only because he did not wish to have any embarrassing moment or disgrace of any kind attached to his person, so he had come to the office quietly and had not yelled at me as he demanded I sign the papers. He was angry. He was beyond angry, even. I looked at the documents again as I left my office, heading home. Well, not really home since it lacked the usual warmth, and Zane was currently crashing at his sister's place. I had taken to living there for the past 3 months since I had confronted him, and we had talked about that godforsaken video, and he lashed out, pulling me to our former, thank the heavens, soundproofed shared bedroom where he proceeded to berate me and call me names from whore to using some other expletives to describe me, and saying that a cheater had no right to question him who had been so faithful to me since before we were even married. His words had frankly hit me where it hurt and had left me completely speechless before him. Zane had always been a master at hiding his emotions and reactions so well that he only let you see what you wanted to see. I knew him that well. But I did not know him well enough, apparently, because as soon as those papers were in his hands, he immediately ordered me out of the house. I was taken aback. Zane explained that everything that had happened had been leading up to that very moment. The moment when I would leave his house and I could feel my eyes and cheeks getting wet. I was crying. Zane merely rolled his eyes and asked if witches cried in any other situation other than the bedroom, and I choked on a sob as I asked him what he meant, and another voice from upstairs. A labored voice answered for Zane from upstairs. It was Zane's older sister wheeling a fairly large suitcase down the stairs, panting in exhaustion before finally giving up and throwing the box down the stairs in anger. Zane laughed at his sister when she panted out that she did not know how a woman that was not serious about marriage could own so many belongings in the house of a man she had no intention of staying with. The siblings laughed together at their own joke at my expense while I just looked on dumbfounded as they played with my misery, and while I did not want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break, I could not really help it. I broke down there and then and cried like a child while the siblings scoffed and called my tears of anguish crocodile and walked past me. Zane stopped in his tracks and told me to ensure that I leave the house soonest, by evening or right away if I could even. He added that I should leave the other clothes in the wardrobe, that is, other than the clothes in the suitcase that his sister had dragged downstairs. I did not need to pack them up as well since it was Zane himself that had gotten those clothes for me. Zane looked at me with disgust and told me that he would rather burn them than let me take them with me since I would not be taking the rings in the car too. I turned sharply at this and found Zane staring at me with a sad expression before he rolled his eyes and walked out of the house to meet his sister who was waiting for him in the car. Zane had been the reason why the rings were gone. I did not lose them. and the car was not at an auto shop for repairs or maintenance. Zane had taken everything that he had ever given me in the marriage. That was how Zane decided to punish me for my actions. My tears wouldn't stop flowing, and I could not stop myself from crumpling the brown envelope in my hands as I kicked my legs out and sat on the floor, pulling at my hair like a desolate woman in mourning. Yeah, I was definitely in mourning. I was beyond devastated. Update. I figured out the video was shot by the chief bridesmaid of my friend, the friend who had thrown the bachelor party I had attended that started all the drama. Tasha, the chief bridesmaid, was the culprit, and it was obvious because the angle of the video was where she had been seated. Tasha had her eye on Zane for so long, and the party was the perfect excuse to drive a wedge between Zane and I. Tasha planned to end my marriage so she could waltz in after making me look like a loose whore and painting herself as an absolute angel. My friend Melody had told me that it was the Tasha in question that had suggested the drunken game of truth or dare, and she was the one who I had trusted to the point of downing whatever shot Tasha brought to me. I let her pour me shot after shot until I was more than a half drunk, and she encouraged me to play the game. Melody told me that she had gone upstairs with her husband to be earlier. If not, she would have stopped Tasha herself. Tasha had been the one to anonymously send the video to my husband, and since she was a damn colleague at Zane's workplace, she had been trying to make advances at him again since the video had been sent. Melody had confronted Tasha, and she had confessed to doing all of it, and she woefully lamented that Zane had known that she wanted him, and had still rejected her despite divorcing me. Tasha had looked me dead in the eye and said that if it were in a different setting, she would have paid to have men sleep with, and it would all be taped so it would look like an affair, and my husband would have done more than divorce me. I was shocked to hear that from a person I called my friend, and it made me reevaluate how I made friends. And while it was a relief to find out that I had in fact been set up, it still did not change anything because I was still at fault, not only in Zane's books but also in mine, because no amount of intoxication would excuse my kissing another man and letting him grope me in a party filled with, although equally drunk and carefree, friends and acquaintances as a married woman that I was. And while I did enjoy the kiss, I did not want it to lead to my marriage being ruined. Zane did not listen to what I had to say, and he told me that nothing would change his mind, because he did not want a careless woman for a wife, no matter the situation. I know I can't change anything, but I lost the man I love because I got too drunk. I hate that, and be careful who you call your friends. I know it's still my fault.
I'll never forget the day my life changed forever. You know, when you were your father's last hope to run his businesses and continue what he had started? I didn't know that my small misstep would cost me everything, including what my father had worked hard for. If someone was once in my situation, what would you have done? How would you have dealt with the greedy and selfish husband? Let me take you over to what happened before the whole ordeal. So I, F30, met this fine gentleman while we were in university. We were studying at University of Johannesburg, UJ, in South Africa. I was doing my third year in business psychology, which was my last year to obtain a bachelor degree. My aim was to get a master's degree on the same course, so I was going to continue studying till I got my qualification. Well, my goal was to start a business coaching company, helping business owners develop their soft skills, such as communication, flexibility, leadership, problem solving, and time management. My husband, M34, was doing his fourth year of diploma in business law. We met at campus. I was in a cafeteria sitting alone going through my books because I had a test coming up, so I needed to focus more in order to pass, which meant I didn't need any distraction. I was revising some questions when Brian came and sat down on the table I was at. He was a clean and handsome guy. His spectacles suited him very well. Though he looked like a snob, he was still handsome. He asked if I needed any help because I looked stressed. And yes, I was stressed. The test was stressing me out, but I had to do what I had to do right. I ignored him for obvious reasons. 1. Being I didn't want to entertain university boys, I had to focus on what I went to university for. 2. I didn't want any destruction. His handsome snobbish self was a destruction enough, but I didn't want to give him that satisfaction. He kept trying to converse with me until I asked him to go, and I didn't need his help, which he didn't do. I was relieved when it was time for my next class, so I left him there without saying anything. He kept coming whenever he was on lunch break or didn't have any class, trying to talk to me and asking me out on an ice cream date. I was charmed by his enthusiasm, but I wouldn't show him. I wanted him to sweat a little. You can't expect a girl who gets everything at home to just jump and say, "Okay, let's go out for ice cream," right? As much as I got everything at home, my father was a businessman, and my mother was a head of department, CHOD, at Spark Randburg High School. I was the only child they had. I admired my parents' relationship. As much as my father was not perfect, but he was an awesome parent. My mom, on the other hand, sigh, was a very strict parent. She always wanted perfection, but nonetheless, she was a great mom. The love they shared was so amazing to a point that I looked at them as my role model. They shared everything, did everything together, but most importantly, they loved each other very much. That's what I wanted when I got married. Okay, enough about my parents, let's go back to my husband. So after the whole month rejecting him and him not giving up, I eventually agreed and went out with him. We started getting along from there. As snobbish as he looked, but he was funny and had the brains. We started off as friends. We would go out a lot, trying out new restaurants. He was from a big township called Davidon. As time went by, we got closer each and every time we spent time together. He lived in one of the student apartments in Auckland Park, which was not far from our campus. I loved spending time with him. I would miss him when he was not around, or if I didn't talk to him for a day. I think I fell in love with it. Or didn't I? He became my best friend. We shared almost everything. During December holidays, he was supposed to go home in Davidson, but he didn't, since he took holiday jobs to cover his studies and send money home. He came from a financially stretched home, which made it his responsibility to take care of his family and his study fees. He had 3 younger siblings who depended on him and a mother who was an alcoholic. As much as his background was not good compared to where I was coming from, I fell in love with him. I used to go to his workplace to bring him lunch. He took a job as a bartender at one of the busiest nightclubs during weekends. He used to do night shifts because it would be busy at night, plus it was a festive season. And worked as a waiter during the weekdays when he didn't have classes. I loved the way he was dedicated and tried everything for his family and himself. I remember it was the 16th of December, which was a public holiday. He invited me to his home to meet his siblings and mother. I admired the relationship he had with his siblings. He had that fatherly love and warmth. His mother was a very kind and welcoming woman, but her alcoholic behavior was a problem. I asked him what had happened to their father, and I saw sadness and sorrow in his eyes, so I didn't ask anything further. All I wanted to do was to love him and his family despite their background. My mother once asked if I had a boyfriend because I was going out a lot, even on holidays. Well, I used to spend holidays with my family or visit my father's hometown called Greytown in KwaZulu-Natal. I was not ready to get lectures from my mother, so I denied having a boyfriend and told her that I was going out with friends. Brian was the only person I enjoyed spending time the most with. My childhood friends would complain, saying that I have changed and they felt like I had ditched them for a dude I met at campus. Well, my friends were snobs and discriminative. I told them about my relationship with Brian, but they didn't approve of it because he came from a background with a low standard of living. I hate people who judge others by their background while they don't even know their own background. They just know their parents and their big homes. My father taught me to embrace where I was coming and never judge or look down on other people despite where they were coming from. So hearing my friends talk low of my boyfriend as if he was not trying to better his life changed our friendship, which made me spend more time with Brian than with them. My father always reminded me the importance of family, knowing your roots and respect, which was why he made it his mission to take me to his hometown, to know about his roots, which are mine also. As strict as my mother was, I was glad she was not like my friends' mothers. I liked them, but they were too big for their own shoes. They forgot the importance of humanity and respect for others just because they were married to people who had money. I won't say they were rich, but they were affording. My mother was also from Greytown. Her and my father were high school sweethearts. Cute, right? The people I called friends used to say Brian was just with me. Because of my parents' money and he didn't love me, he was just using me to gain something. After they had said that, I completely ended the friendship because it was fake. So the only person who became my friend was my boyfriend. Brian and I dated for 2 years. He had finished with his studies and graduated. I was so proud of him. I introduced him to my parents a year after we had started dating. My father welcomed him, but my mother was a little suspicious of him, though she tried by all means to hide it. My mother gave me a lecture on how I should not trust Johannesburg boys. When we start being intimate, we should use protection, because she didn't want unplanned pregnancies and the boy would run. She was so caught up in what everyone was saying about Johannesburg boys and its city. She said Johannesburg was only a city for opportunities, not to find a soulmate because life was too fast, especially for the ones who came from the villages. I understood her, but I was not going to fear that Brian would change me someday or leave me for another person. Would he? He was not perfect for everyone, but he was for me. I mean, he was my man after all, so I didn't need anyone's validation to see that he was perfect for me. He got an opportunity to be a legal intern at Total Energies Marketing South Africa, Pty Ltd, which was based in Johannesburg, CBD. Brian and I started talking about building our own family. He is also a Zulu native, so he understood the procedure of taking a Zulu girl. He had big dreams for our future, his family's future. I don't know what went wrong with him. We were so much in love and nothing would get in between us. That time I was doing my 5th year, working towards getting my master's degree in business psychology. My father introduced me to his business associates who needed some advice and wanted to venture into other businesses, which I gladly accepted because it would help me gain connections and experience. My father had a logistic company that he started after he had bought a farm back at home. He already had livestock that he had inherited from my late grandfather. With his Bachelor of Science in Agriculture, it came in handy when he bought a farm and increased the number of his father's livestock. Village people used to buy his cows whenever they were to host ceremonies until this one time when his livestock almost got stolen. He decided to buy the farm, not only for his livestock's safety, but to also expand his business. He started by getting orders from supermarkets around Greytown to deliver fresh fruits and vegetables. His fruits and vegetables demands got high. Then he decided to buy a truck that would transport the goods to retail markets. That was when his business expanded to other cities, later got orders outside the province. I remember all this because he used to take me to the farm and taught me the importance of working hard for your own wealth. My father was my inspirer. I remember when his business was not doing well. His accountant or financial advisor had stolen a lot of money and didn't pay taxes, so the South African Revenue Services, SARS, wanted to shut down his businesses until he had paid the money he owed. My father was so devastated because the guy had gone AWOL. He went through a depression phase because of the pressure he was getting from SARS. I thought I was losing my father that time. He had resorted to alcohol and started shouting at my mother for no reason whenever he was drunk. The sour home situation went on until my uncle, who was a lawyer, helped him with the case and found him a business therapist, who then helped him get over the depressing phase he was going through. A couple of months later, the person who had stolen money from my father was found and got arrested. That was when I got in love with business psychology studies. I wanted to help business people who were going through what my father went through. I saw how my father was when his business was in jeopardy of being closed down and how depressed he was. It didn't only affect him, but it also affected us as the whole family, including the family that stayed in the village. I never wanted to see any business owner struggling or going through something like what my father went through. I didn't want to see businesses being shut down because of selfish and greedy people like that financial manager he had. I was so determined to make my father proud, even if it was the last thing to do. So I studied hard to achieve my goals. 7 years of studying business psychology was no child's play, but it was worth it. I had a very patient and supportive partner. We dated for the full 7 years, but he had paid for my bride price, which is called lobola in our culture. Every cultural procedure, so we were only left with white and traditional wedding. He proposed when I was doing my 5th year, then visited my family to show respect and do what was right. I thought he was my soulmate. I remember when my father asked if I was ready for marriage, I told him that I was ready, but I wanted to graduate first. So the traditional and white wedding had to wait till I got my master's degree. We traveled all the way from Johannesburg to KwaZulu-Natal for the Lobola negotiations. My baby had to travel for 6 hours with his family from Johannesburg to Greytown. I was the happiest woman. I got to be with the man of my heart. Guys, you don't know how much I loved my husband. Did I count the chickens before they hatched? I knew he loved me, he showed that to me in every way, and he made me the woman amongst others. At least he made me believe he loved me. I completed my master's degree, and as planned, we started planning for our wedding. He was still working at Total Energies, but not as an intern, but as a permanent legal advisor. Wait. Before I tell you about our wedding plans, on my last year in university and during my exams, I received a call from some lady, name withheld for personal reasons, saying that I should tell my fiancé to be a responsible parent or she would bring their child to live with me since I was the stepmother. I couldn't get angry at my husband for something the woman had said, so I had to ask him first. That time we had bought a small house, enough for us. Well, more like he bought a house because he believed that when a man had paid the bride price to the bride's family, he should have his house where he would stay with his fiancé or wife. In Zulu culture, once the bride price or lobola has been paid to your family, as the bride you are no longer allowed to stay at home but at your house, since it has always been said that the man without his missing rib is no man, just like Adam was lonely without Eve. When he came back from work, I had prepared his favorite meal, which was steamed bread and sugar beans, which was, and still is, a Zulu's traditional dish along with cow's head, also known as inhloko. I even went as far as preparing him bathing water, imagine. So he came back earlier that day. It was like he knew what I had planned. We had our dinner over a small conversation. I didn't want to make him see that I knew about his child. I then randomly asked if he was to hear that I had an affair outside our relationship and got a child, but gave up the child and he found out from someone else. What would he do? Which was something that was not going to happen, or most females with a good mindset would do, no matter what the struggle was. After my question, he looked at me and asked if there was something I wanted to tell him that he didn't know. He kept dodging my question by asking me other questions. Surely he thought I was the one with a secret. If I had gotten pregnant outside our relationship, how would I have hidden the tummy because we had been living together since he went home to pay for my bride price? It's impossible and insane, right? I told him that I had no secrets and I was just trying to make a conversation. He got so angry that night and told me that if he were to find out that I had cheated, he would do something really bad to a point that I would curse the day we met. I was so confused and surprised by his outburst, which meant that he had a secret. I let that slide. Not because I was a fool or something, but I was protecting my peace in order to stay focused at least until my exams end. Since that night, he would come back home very late, saying he was busy at work, but I knew that his knockoff time was 16 euro. He avoided me for the whole week. I didn't care less because I was also swamped with exams, so I didn't need his childish behavior to distract me. After I had finished my final exams, he said we should start with wedding preparations because there was no time to waste anymore, since we had wasted more time waiting for me to complete my studies. He wanted us to get married before my graduation, which I declined, and told him that we would start wedding preparations after my graduation, which obviously made him angry and impatient. Was I wrong or selfish to ask him to wait for my graduation before wedding planning? I got confused by the sudden rush, because he even suggested that we should go to court or home affairs and get married there, since I wanted to wait for my graduation before planning a big wedding. I didn't know what was going on with him, but whatever it was, raised some red flags in our relationship. I didn't tell anyone, not even my father, that my fiancé had changed on me. In our culture, it is believed that a woman builds her home and makes sure that she stays. Even if the steel is hot, you have to be patient and bear with your husband or fiancé. I kept everything on my chest, and because I loved him, I agreed to go to court with him just to get a wedding certificate. Mind you, I didn't even tell my parents about that plan, but I believed in my husband, so I agreed. We got married in a community of property. I know what was foolish of me, but it was what I thought was good for me and my husband to have a joint marriage. Few months after our secret wedding, I graduated. I was so happy that I had reached the destination that I had always wanted to reach. I didn't care about finding a job because my goal was to open my own practice in which I would get the help from my father. He introduced me to his business associates and those who had ideas of starting businesses to coach them. It had always been my dream to make my parents proud and see me graduate, especially my father and I fulfilled that wish. Time passed. My father's connections helped me a lot to get on my feet. My husband and I were on good terms, no more fights or grumpiness. We were the couple that fell in love in university. We were happy again, and I still had kept the girls' call a secret. We started with our wedding planning. He didn't want us to hire a wedding planner, he said. Hiring a wedding planner is a waste of money, and he was not marrying a wedding planner but me, so I am the one who should be hands-on during my wedding preparations with the help of my mother or siblings so that I can get everything I wanted and needed for our wedding to be perfect. I understood that, but my mother went ahead and hired a wedding planner saying that she didn't give birth to me to suffer. My husband was told that the planner was my distant cousin, because we didn't want him to find out that Mom had hired someone to plan our wedding, while he said he didn't want any planner. My husband was weird and acted like a snob for someone who came from a township. The wedding was planned and the date was set. After a month, we tied the knot in front of our families and friends. My father was so happy, he even shed a tear during his speech. I was the happiest woman alive. I got to spend and celebrate the union of my husband and I. Few months after our wedding, my husband's mother had passed on due to lung cancer, which meant he had to take responsibility for his siblings, even though they had grown old enough to look after themselves. It was really sad. My husband was devastated and pushed everyone away, but I had to be there for him through it all. I had made a vow in front of our family, friends, a priest, and God, so I had to stand by him, whether he was pushing me away or not. After his mother's death, he resorted to alcohol. He changed a lot. From going out early in the morning to coming back late at night. He would come back intoxicated and end up saying hurtful words to me. I thought it was grief, but that went on till I couldn't take it anymore. I got so lonely in the house. Yes, I was working and got busy sometimes, but I missed my husband. I had missed spending weekends with him, but he was nowhere to be found. When I raised the issue, he would tell me that he was the man of the house, and he was not going to tolerate being asked about his whereabouts by a woman. The only duty I had was to be a wife, not a detective. It was emotionally draining having to be patient for someone who had changed on you and made you feel unloved anymore. Sometimes I would visit my parents, but it would only be a day thing, not a sleepover. As much as I wanted to share what was happening in my marriage, I had no one to share my marriage problems with. I started going out on solo dates. The stress and tension was too much. Going out really helped me. I once heard a phrase that says, when a lady is stressed, shopping is the best therapy, which was not true to me because I was not a person who took shopping as therapy. So shopping was not what would make me happy or forget about what was happening in my house. One night I went to this pub and restaurant called the Guildhall Pub and Restaurant to relax my mind. When I arrived, it was packed. And to find out that there was an event happening, it was a great distraction for me and my mind. I needed it, and I felt alive again. I forgot all about my marriage problems and my sudden changed husband. I mean, we didn't even get to our first-year anniversary at least. It was only a few months after we had said our vows, and he changed. He became a stranger at our home. All I wanted was for him to recognize me as his wife and let me into whatever he was going through. I thought it was grief, but no, it wasn't because his siblings would call me and ask if they could speak to him. His phone was unreachable. I had so much fun at the pub and restaurant. I got to hang out with strangers. We drank, danced, and ate. It was a lot of fun. I felt alive and free again. I felt like I was my old self. Not that I was going out and getting drunk, but I was free and happy. I missed being my old self, not a jailed wife. Was I wrong to choose myself for once? So there was this guy, name withheld for safety and personal reasons, who was with the strangers that I had befriended. We clicked, the conversations between us were flowing. It was like we had known each other for a very long time. We had a great time together, then from there we became close friends. He became my shoulder to cry on. He gave me advice without judging me. My marriage lacked happiness, attention, affection, and time. That guy gave me all that. He made me feel alive and took me back to the times when my husband and I were still getting to know each other. Time went by. The guy and I were pretty close. I considered him my best friend and the brother I have ever had. One weekend, I decided to visit Davidin to see Brian's siblings. I had never seen them ever since the day of their mother's funeral. I felt bad. I had been a horrible sister-in-law, and guilt was eating me up, so I went there to check how they had been holding up. Also to check if I would find my husband there because he had been gone for 3 days without calling. I was worried about him. I asked myself every day where I went wrong or what I did wrong, but I couldn't get any answers. I thought I was the problem. I started doubting myself. I had thought that maybe I was no longer enough for him or I had changed and got ugly. What was I supposed to think? I started having low self-esteem. I was sinking deep into depression. But luckily, I had a friend that I had got from the pub and restaurant. He was everything and more. I told my father about what was going on in my marriage, and the advice I got was, in marriage, you have to be patient for your husband. Just make sure not to make something that would drive him away from your marriage. I didn't understand that kind of advice because it was useless and pathetic. So I had to be patient and bear with the emotionally abusive husband. When I got to Davidin, I found the siblings alone with a toddler. What caught my attention was that the baby looked like my husband, which made me think that maybe it's the baby of that lady who once called me and told me to tell my husband to be a responsible father. I couldn't believe that my husband had deceived me. I stayed with the siblings and asked them when they had last seen their big brother. The elder sibling told me that he had come to see them 3 days ago, and he would be back on the day I went to see the siblings. The bubbly sibling, who they called her Linda, told me that he had left with some aunt. What confused me was that if he had gone with the mother of the child, why would they have left the child with the kids? It just didn't make any sense. Curiosity got the better of me. I found myself asking whose baby they were babysitting, and they confirmed my suspicions by telling me that the child was their brother's, and they had fetched him from his grandmother's house where he stayed. I couldn't believe what my husband had put me through. I mean, the time I tried to make a conversation about having a child outside our relationship, he got angry, of which I couldn't understand. And he even suspected me of cheating while he knew that he was the one who was unfaithful in our marriage. Was I a fool for thinking he had changed before our wedding? Months passed and my husband was back home, but his sudden disappearances didn't stop. I asked him about the child and he told me to mean what I came to his family for, not anything else. Ever since then, I stopped trying. I stopped begging him to treat me as his wife. I tried going back home, but the stupid husband of mine called a family meeting on me. So my parents told me to go back to my house because there was no wife who lives at home, and went back to her parents. By doing that, I would be opening the door for other women to take over my home. God knows how tired I was. I wanted to divorce him, but then I thought about my assets that I had worked hard for. He would get 50% of what I had owned, and besides, my stupid heart still loved and longed for him. I had hope that he would change. I continued going out with my best friend. I was drinking a lot. Then I went to work. My father found out about my changed behavior. He got me help. He was so disappointed in me, and I didn't blame him. One day, I was bored and needed some distraction, so I went to my friend's house. I knew he would make me feel better. I mean, he was my best friend, right? As we were chilling, he started confessing his feelings for me, which shocked me because I took him as my best friend, brother. I couldn't understand his sudden developed feelings. I rejected him and told him that I was married and he was my best friend. I didn't see him in the way he was seeing me. The guy did the unthinkable and blackmailed me to at least sleep with him or become his booty call if I didn't want my husband to find out about the times I had been spending with him and telling him about my marriage problems. I was so surprised by his sudden change. I didn't know what to do because he had been recording all our conversations, which I didn't know about. I had no control over the situation. I didn't want my husband or my father to know about my friendship with this man. So I obliged we kissed, which was the only thing we did, and agreed to be his booty call. But I gave him that promise because I wanted to get out of his house and go to the cops to report his psychic behavior. A couple of months passed, my father got sick, no one knew what was wrong with him, even the doctors couldn't find what was going on. So we ended up seeking traditional help, because in a Zulu culture, it is believed that if someone is sick and the doctors don't find anything wrong with that person, that only means one thing. That person has been bewitched, or someone was bewitching him and making him sick. When my father started getting sick, my husband came back home. He became the supportive and caring husband that I had fallen in love with. He was there for me and my family throughout the whole process of consulting with traditional healers. I asked myself who would want or bewitch my father because he was a kind person. Didn't have enemies, maybe he did, and we didn't know about them. I mean, my father protected himself a lot traditionally because it is believed that a Zulu businessman has to be protected at all times. Few weeks after the traditional healer visit, my father passed on. I was so devastated and broken. Later on, my mother followed. I felt lost, alone, and abandoned. My mother also got sick for a while. The doctors said it was stress or something that related to stress, as she couldn't take the passing of my father. Well, I didn't blame her. I also would have died if I were to lose the husband like my father, and the family members started calling her names, saying that she had bewitched my father to get the inheritance since my father left everything to me and my mother. Most family members were angry and out for blood, so my mother not making it didn't surprise me because it was over her powers. A year later, I had healed but haven't forgotten about my parents. I was more than happy that my husband had been with me during my healing process. He was so patient with me, and he became the Brian I fell in love with. Since my father's business was under my name, I asked my husband to become the business's legal advisor and put him in charge of my father's logistics company, which he did very well with because he had a plan of opening a logistic company branch in another province to grow the business, and the demand was high. So I gave him a go-ahead. There was this other day when he came back with some papers. He told me that they needed my signature. I didn't ask a lot or read them because I trusted my husband, so I signed, not knowing that I was signing my rights to him. A week later, he came back looking angry. He didn't even tell me what had made him angry. He slapped me and called me names. I was so confused and shocked by his outburst until he told me that he knew about my floozy ways with the guy I met at the pub. Since that day, my life became miserable. I was paying for the little misstep I had made. My only sin was trusting a stranger and telling him about my marriage. Worst part, even if I tried to deny it, Brian had proof, which meant that the guy had sent him everything because I got him arrested and he got out within 6 months. I thought he was not going to bother me anymore since it had been a year. I asked Brian how long he knew about the pub guy. He told me in the eyes that he knew way before my father had got sick. What shocked me the most was when he confessed to me that he was the one who killed my father, and he knew that since I was the only child they had, everything was coming to me. I couldn't believe it. All of the acts he pulled, being supportive and loving, was all an act. He even confessed that he once cheated when I was busy being serious with school and he got someone pregnant. I failed to understand how I missed everything. I mean, everything was right under my nose. His behavior kept changing like the weather. Because of my misstep, I paid a great fortune. I lost everything, including my inheritance. I was left with nothing. I regretted and cursed the day I allowed Brian to speak to me. Life changed so much that I found myself going back to Greytown to stay with my mother's family. Was I wrong to fall in love and be bared with Brian's abusive behavior? Please advise me.